Thalassophobia, the intense and persistent fear of deep bodies of water. This is All Things Creepy, let's begin. The crew of the submarine Deep Diver had never seen such darkness before. The pressure outside the vessel was crushing, and the only sound that could be heard was the constant hum of the engines. They had been descending for hours, and the tension in the air was palpable. As they went deeper and deeper into the abyss, strange shapes began to appear outside the viewports. They seemed to be watching the crew, lurking in the shadows just out of sight. It was as if the darkness itself was alive and hungry. Suddenly, the engines faltered and the lights flickered. The crew scrambled to try and fix the problem, but it was too late. The submarine began to drift, powerless in the currents. And that's when they saw it. A massive creature looming in the darkness, its eyes glowing like orbs of fire. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, and it filled them with a primal fear. As the creature approached, the crew braced for impact, but it passed them by, disappearing back into the inky blackness. They were left alone once more, adrift in the abyss. But they knew that they were not truly alone. There were other creatures out there, watching, waiting. The crew of the Deep Diver realized that they had made a terrible mistake in venturing so far down into the deep unknown. The ocean had claimed them, and they would never be seen again. So that is the first of 3 short stories today. I found this one interesting because there is an immediate threat, but we don't really get to see that. It's more of implied. Very Lovecraftian, of course. And to me, the idea of being in a submarine, completely out of our element as humans deep underwater, is truly terrifying, let alone when you now know and have seen the kind of things that are lurking beneath. And this creature didn't actually attack the submarine. It's more of a case of, well, if this is what we've seen, imagine what we can't see. And to me, that is the very essence of thalassophobia. So now let's move on to story number 2, the rising tides. The villagers had always feared the ancient beings that lurked in the depths of the sea. For centuries, they had offered up sacrifices to appease them, hoping to avoid their wrath. But it seemed that no amount of tribute could satisfy the sea monsters. One day, the sea began to rise at an alarming rate. At first, the villagers were hopeful that it was just a temporary surge, but the water level continued to climb higher and higher. Soon the streets were completely submerged, and the villagers were forced to seek refuge on the roofs of their homes. It was then that they saw the monsters rising from the depths, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They towered over the tiny village, their ancient forms dwarfing even the tallest trees. The villagers watched in horror as the monsters unleashed their fury on the land. Their tentacles lashed out, crushing buildings and tearing apart the landscape. The creatures seemed to relish in the destruction, their twisted mouths gaping wide in a grotesque grin. As the sun set on the ravaged village, the monsters retreated back into the sea, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The villagers huddled together on the roofs, too frightened to move. They knew that the monsters would return, and they were powerless to stop them. Rising tides had brought with them a terror beyond their wildest nightmares, and the villagers knew that they would never again be safe. So that's the second story, the rising tides. And this one's interesting too. It's once again a Lovecraft spin, leaning more towards stories like A Shadow over Innsmouth, with the coastal town trying to appease an ancient deity almost that lives deep under the sea. And then here we actually see the repercussions when they are not able to do that. And it's strange, the monsters, they're described as having a grotesque grin at one point, which implies they know what they're doing, or they're having some sort of human emotion and they're happy. But realistically, this is from the villager's perspective, and a creature opening its mouth full of sharp teeth, it could just appear to be smiling, and this is just how their brains rationalised it. So I thought that was an interesting touch. And in my opinion, this was quite a freaky story. I've lived on coastal towns, and if you have as well, I'm sure on the odd occasion you've looked out to the sea and just wondered what's out there, what could be watching us. This is our domain, and that is someone else's domain, or something else's domain. So now let's move on to the third and final story for today's video. The Abyssal Watchers. Dr. Michaels had always been fascinated by the ocean and the mysteries that lay beneath its surface. He had spent his life studying the creatures that dwelled in the deepest, darkest parts of the abyss, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw on his latest expedition. Dr. Michaels and his team of researchers had descended deep into the ocean, their submersible slowly sinking into the murky depths. As they descended, the water grew darker and colder, and the pressure began to mount. Suddenly, a shape appeared out of the gloom. At first it seemed like a trick of the light, but as they drew closer, they could make out a mass of writhing tentacles and gleaming eyes. Dr. Michaels felt a thrill of fear and excitement as he realized that he was face to face with an ancient monster from the depths of the sea. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, and he knew that it was the discovery of a lifetime. But as they continued their descent, they soon realized that they were not alone. Other creatures were watching them from the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the submersible like predators stalking their prey. Dr. Michaels felt a growing sense of unease as he realized that they were trespassing on the territory of these ancient beings, and they were not welcome. As they made their way back to the surface, Dr. Michaels couldn't shake the feeling that they had unleashed something terrible, something that had been lurking in the depths for millennia, waiting for the right moment to strike. He knew that they had to warn the world about what they had discovered, but he also knew that few would believe him. The ocean was full of mysteries, and the creatures that dwelled within it were more ancient and terrible than anyone could have imagined. So that was the third and final story for today, The Abyssal Watchers. This one's from the perspective of a doctor, so it's some sort of expedition. It's not stated what, so potentially marine biology related, something along those lines, maybe geological. And once again, we see creatures in the depths of the sea, but they don't actually do anything. So I'm not sure with this story if maybe the writer had a bit of a lapse of judgment, or there's some missed opportunity there, but it does seem like maybe they missed an opportunity for the creatures to interact with the vessel in some way. But then again, maybe that's what they were going for, the idea that these creatures are out there and don't even interact with you. You're so insignificant and small to them, deep in the depths of the ocean, that they barely even acknowledge you. But of course, there's always that threat that one of them might notice you and something might happen to you. So once again, a Lovecraftian twist, but then again, this is also based on reality. There are things deep in the ocean that we have yet to discover. Of course, the gigantic, giant and colossal squids are species that are massive in size and have only recently been caught on camera, which is quite terrifying and makes you wonder what else there is down there in the depths. In fact, the only reason we even know of some of these species is because sperm whales, a species that comes to the surface, have been found with injuries from them. So imagine what else lurks below. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are there any particular short stories you'd like me to read? Like the video if you did, Of course, let me know what your favourite of these stories was. I think mine was the second one. I like the relation to H.P. Lovecraft, and it actually takes place above water, but still makes us terrified of what's under the water. So I think that takes a bit more skill than just having the setting deeper in the water, like with the submarine. I did enjoy all three of them though, and of course, just for some context, if you're new to the channel, this is how I read these stories. I read them for the first time, it's my first impression, and that's what I base my reviews on. One reading, and then just my thoughts. But without any further ado, like the video if you did, share it with a friend, and of course, if you haven't already, subscribe for more creepy content.